What does freedom mean to me? Freedom. In America, it ain't free. Now, you say I'm American, and let me use some common sense and validate your claims of saying that I'm equal to you today. Now you say I came here as a slave, so what you Christians do? You said it was okay, and you said I was your property, 3/5 a man, that's what you thought of me. Then you said we're not equal, separate drinks, separate eats, separate everything. Then you beat us, suck your dogs on us, then you worked us and then you murdered us. Black Panthers started working, y'all. They were protecting and serving us, making sure every black child's eating. Ain't no more black people getting beaten. Then you say, okay, now that's enough. These super predators gotta pay. Round them up, shoot them down, and don't you fail. The reward of being black is you go to jail. What does freedom mean to me? Freedom. In America, it ain't free. Freedom. What does freedom mean to me? Freedom. In America, it ain't free. Freedom. What does freedom mean to me? Freedom. In America, it ain't free.
Okay. Welcome back, YouTube, Facebook, and all of you around the country who are following along with us as we read along with the contract with Black America. The contract with Black America was written by Ice Cube that he wanted to talk about and what made us do it again. And reminder is that of all the flack we were hearing from people who just hadn't apparently read this contract, so we're going to read it. Right now, we're going to jump right into it with 5 and 6. We've been through representation and lending. You can go back and see those videos. We also went through judicial reform and the constitutional amendment that he proposes for the 13th Amendment. Now we're going to read through police reform and entertainment reform. All righty, getting right to it. First thing, qualified immunity will be eliminated. Process of qualified immunity for policemen. Legislation to reverse the Supreme Court case Blumhoff versus Rickard, 572 U.S. 765 from 2014, in which the immunity was upheld. Now, before legislation is passed, the Democratic Party should oppose qualified immunity when the official party platform is drafted in August. This will pressure mayors to instruct city attorneys not to assert qualified immunity as an affirmative defense. Police or lawyers can still argue why they should not be charged because they acted in good faith, but the presumption must be reversed. That's his first point. Second point, mandatory malpractice insurance is to be carried by police officers just like lawyers and doctors do. This protects victims' ability to collect on bona fide claims against police. Insurance to be paid for by the police department. As a result, an officer who creates too many legal actions would be dropped because of financial pressure by the rise in insurance rates, rather than requiring another officer to cross the blue line. Insurance companies would probably also demand de-escalation training to lower rates, Ice Cube is saying. So now those are pretty good points right there. An officer can't automatically gain immunity just because he say he doing something in the name of his uniform when we know they lying. They got to be, then his second point is they got to have some kind of insurance so you can do something about it. being taken advantage of. Third point that he's making here would be the municipalities liable for officers' unconstitutional actions. Overturn with legislation Monell versus the Department of Social Services Supreme Court case number 436 U.S. 658 in 1978 that protected municipalities from unconstitutional actions by police. Now, this would add skin in the game for cities which have the most direct power to help reform policing. I think that's great. Now, remember, you want to go back and look at those points on qualified immunity and malpractice and the liability for municipalities in your area. The next point is on federal laws regarding police misconduct to change the standard from willfulness to recklessness. Now, recklessness still poses a high bar to identify and prosecute police misconduct. It will make it more possible. Again, while recklessness still poses a high bar to identify and prosecute for police misconduct, it would make it more possible than to say that they was willfully going out to do this. Because the defense is, no, they were just acting in the line. Were they reckless in their action? I mean, could you, instead of shooting them in the head, could you have just shot them in the leg? Were you reckless? I think that's good. Now, police unions can be held liable and sued for shielding bad cops, suppressing evidence and testimony to that effect, and for knowing the reckless disregard of material evidence that an officer is unfit mentally for the job. Well, that's something big right there in itself. Next point, mandatory dashboard and body cams. In the event that they are turned off and the incident results in a serious injury or death to any suspect or witness, it would be considered a felony by that police officer and punishable by prison unless proof of the malfunction is shown. If there is a claim of excessive force or abuse and the cams are off, the first incident would result in a warning, and the second incident would be a suspension, and the third would require firing. Now, we all know how sweet that would be for everybody to have that on. Half the things we get stopped for would be eliminated because they know better. Now, the cam footage is this next point. Body and the dashboard should be released within a week for incidents resulting in death, serious injury, or that give rise to charges of excessive force. You can't hold that thing forever. You got to let it go and let us see it. Next point. Let's do away with the no-knock warrant. They are unnecessary as police can secure the scene. That we know what that latest death was with Breonna. No-knock warrant, I think that was involving. Let's see here. Next point. Mandatory name tags and affiliations requirements applies to all police and law enforcement authorities at the local, state, and federal level, with non-compliance resulting in disciplinary action. Undercover assignments not requiring compliance must be approved by a court. So from now on out, you go undercover. You can't be claiming undercover, none of that other mess unless you got that approved prior to your doing so by a court. Otherwise, you are always to have your identification, who you with and who you were about, what city and what organization you represent should be plainly visible. Chokeholds, illegal nationwide. Next point. This would apply to any maneuver resembling a chokehold or designed to cut off the airway to affect your breathing. It should just be done away. The whole thing it's illegal nationwide. Now, whistleblower protection expanded within the active police force or for those enrolled in a police academy. Discouraging officers under 5 years on the job to report bad behavior will be grounds for dismissal. You're trying to stop some young person who's saying, hey man, what you're doing is wrong, from reporting it. by getting against them or trying to hold something hard over them, that's a crime. And it would be a criminal offense to reveal the identity of the whistleblower, which our president trying to do all the time. So I think that's, man, I don't know who's arguing with these things. Next point, with policing reforms we're talking about. Tampering with evidence results in automatic dismissal from the force, period. Next point, crimes to intentionally withhold exculpatory evidence by police or prosecutors, it's a crime. Newly discovered DNA evidence must be immediately considered to reverse wrongful convictions. You can't have that information and then sit on it for a few years until some organization has finally tracked you down and now it's coming out. Not to do so is a crime, and it would apply to police, judges, and prosecutors. Failure to act would come under the Office of Independent Prosecutors, discussed below. Okay, because he's talking about forming a whole office of independent prosecutors who ain't being held by none of the state or none of the city. Now, once you've been fired for cause as a police officer, you cannot be rehired. I mean, ain't that what they doing a felon? If you're a felon, you can't really go back into a lot of the different fields you was in once. And they could have lied on you, but if they ain't straighten that thing out on your record and it's still coming up and that company's not willing to listen to your explanation and let you present the proof, well, you still got the label. Once you get fired for cause, you cannot be rehired. A police officer fired for the use of excessive force, violent or inappropriate actions directed at a citizen, non-use of body cams, or any felony are not allowed to be hired by any other jurisdiction. You can't leave one city and go to another and be a police officer. Now, next time we turn around, you the police chief and you known racist over here, known to beat up somebody before you even hear who they is. You wrong. That's just wrong, and I think that's a great one right there. Now here he's talking about the creation of the Office of Independent Prosecutors. Now these prosecutors will solely focus on prosecuting police accused of wrongdoing. This would eliminate the conflict of interest from the district attorney, who must charge police, although they have an inherent and unwaivable conflict, as they do require that same police testimony to charge us as criminals. So instead of them having that conflict, they wouldn't have to worry about it because there's a whole set gonna take care of that. Now, attorney generals and district attorneys can no longer accept contributions or endorsement from law enforcement bodies, especially from the police union. You the district attorney or the state's attorney general, and you getting money from the police. So you ain't gonna go against them. You ain't gonna say they wrong. Here go another point. You lose your pension if convicted of a felony or greater while you on the job as a policeman. Wouldn't that make you act better? A budget reallocation he's proposing in what has been referred as the defunding of the police, actually 20% of the 2020 budgets, then going forward, adjusted to inflation, to be dedicated to improving conditions in the lower class and black neighborhoods. Period. 20% of all police department budget increases would also flow to the community organizations tasked with spending those budgets. So you want to do what y'all calling defunding the police, he wants to reallocate it and take 20% of those budgets that would be done for policing and give it to the community. Now, as far as police reform, he's saying there should be a residency requirement for a police officer, and that 90% of police must live within 25 miles of the jurisdiction they work in. You live here in Orlando, you got to live within 25 of the Orlando Police Department. You live in Sanford, you got to live within 25 miles of Sanford. You can't come from out of somewhere else and come over here and be policing our neighborhood. 65% of that department must live within the jurisdiction itself. Now, police forces should demographically reflect the communities they serve. That's what he's talking about. In the case of partners, at least one of them should be living in the jurisdiction. Man, I think that's great. Gotta have police officers who actually live in the community around us. 65% of that force should be from that community. Is all he's saying. Now, what's wrong with saying that? Because then we represented in our community, right? Now, who's arguing with this? All right, listen, his next point in police reform is mandating that a certain number of police departments be paid hours of community service for all street police in the communities they live. A mandatory certain number of police department paid hours of community service, not for somebody on probation, but for the policeman. That's what they matter. Community policing. Non-armed personnel set up to handle most of the cases in the community. These include taking reports for crimes already committed, non-active situations, filing of complaints, non-violent crimes or disputes, and disputes between neighbors, and etc. Remove the permanent placement of police officers from all grade, middle, and high schools, period. Remove a police. He ain't got no business in education. Domestic abuse. Create a domestic abuse service analogous to the child protective service. One that's like that. Create a domestic abuse service that looks like the child abuse services, where the personnel trained to deal with domestic abuse will be sent on such calls, like the child protective services cases where they send out somebody from child services. A domestic abuse service member can then ask for police backup if they feel the situation is dangerous or warranted. Don't come out here for some people arguing without first finding out what's going on, and that'll be that community service officer or that domestic abuse officer who's been called to the scene. That, first of all, free up the police to do some real stuff that's happening instead of coming in trying to run somebody else home. Now, de-escalation is the next thing he's talking about for police training. It's a required training in de-escalation techniques, similar to the Daytona police training based on Scotland's police procedures. So something they're doing in Scotland that they got going on, and showing cases of police abuse and is non-acceptable during trainable. And what is non-acceptable during training? So they're going to show them how to de-escalate and show them what is not acceptable when you out there. Currently, most academies only show footage of cops killing and train police in aggressive technique. A popular saying among the police is, "I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. We want to change that. Continuation of their training. Their training should be updated every 3 years in use of excessive force and dealing with mentally or disabled ill people. Such training would also include racial sensitivity training and update police on the new laws locally or federally. Next point, any police officer who discharges his weapon 5 or more times on the job must go back to the police academy for retraining and take mandatory courses on anger management. That man crazy. He out there shooting because he crazy. And shooting it 5 or more times on the job, must go back to the academy and learn. So wouldn't that cut down on all this? This threshold of weapon use can be increased or decreased depending on jurisdictional averages. See, he ain't even trying to make it. He's saying, again, you got to take where you at in consideration. The intention is to identify and retrain the outliers, as most police officers rarely utilize their gun more than once, if at all, their entire careers. Now, civil rights history must be taught the first month in the police academy or in other training. These classes should include the histories of the black codes and Jim Crow laws. The police need refreshing to act how they act. And remember, this is no longer righteous. It's not right. It's unlawful. Reason for your contact must now be revealed. You must initial contact of any kind with a citizen, no matter what you're talking about, officer. You must state your reason for this contact when you first approach an individual. When he asking you, hey, what you need, officer? And you go put it down. Go get on the ground. You can't do that. You got to first explain what you're doing to this person. Any contact. No duty to speak is the next point he's saying. Police are not, I repeat, they are not allowed to escalate a situation merely because the person refuses to talk to the police or answer their questions without an attorney. See, you know, if you say, well, who is you? Man, I ain't got nothing to say. And they beat you up. Say you was obstructing justice, resisting arrest. That's now part of the, you got no duty to speak. You don't have to speak. You can wait till you represent it properly. I think that's righteous. The police can no longer misstate the law. Misstating the law by police to suspects is not allowed to elicit a testimony. Knowingly threatening people with a greater charge than the situation dictates gives rise to disciplinary actions. You know, when you define knowingly, the standard applied will be what a reasonable police officer should have already known. You can't come up here trying to trump up nothing else on me or boo, what we call boo me up. No, you can't do that. You cannot misstate what is anything to elicit any kind of testimony from me. Remember back to this one, I got no duty to speak until I'm properly represented. His next point in this, we only got a couple more here. Reduce your contact during traffic ticketing. An officer must immediately tell the driver why he or she was pulled over. You cannot search a vehicle without an independent warrant. There's no need for those cited to sign the tickets. Efforts made to reduce the time and contact between officer and driver, which benefits both, i.e. such as digitally limiting conduct as technology allows. Tickets issued and sent by mail where possible. If the officer believes the driver is driving recklessly or is a suspicion of DUI, they may pull over the car, but pullovers can be challenged by dash cam footage. If the footage does not show cause for the concern, the officer can be disciplined. Come on, y'all. I mean, who can argue with this? That's just fair, because they've been doing it to us. Stealing is the next point he make. Who he talking? He talking about the police stealing. Police officers caught stealing from a person's house or vehicle will be charged with double the penalty of a non-officer that a non-officer would be charged with for the same crime. Come on. Good. Military-grade weapons will not be brandished in public unless gunfire or deadly force is already required. Can't walk around with your Uzi in my neighborhood, come in my community with the tank. That's crazy. Y'all come in here, y'all come to arrest somebody on the child support warrant, and y'all got the M16s pointed at everybody, making everybody in the community get down, and you already know where his house at. That's not fair. You know, now, eliminate civil and criminal asset forfeiture as it gives police departments an economic incentive to charge crimes with conflicts with the goals of serving justice. Only exception is if the asset is related to the crime. You say I did something, so y'all come in and take everything, all my computers, all my money, my jewelry, all this, and y'all keep it. You can't do that no more. You can't do that no more. It will be illegal for a police officer to have sex with a detainee or a suspect under their charge. It will be considered statutory rape because it is unreasonable to assume that it's consensual sex due to the power dynamic. You the police. Come on, man. The policy is going to be shoot to wound policy in the event of an unarmed suspect. Fleeing suspects that poses an imminent danger only, or if deadly force is unnecessary. The last point he makes is that we should have an end of all quotas, police basing. All quota based policing. How many tickets y'all made this month? Okay, well, you under quota, you need to go get some more. That's just crazy. Y'all are bandits when y'all doing that. All right, we're going to go through now, those were all of the points that we just went through, y'all, on the police reform. I thought it was great. I think there's some great points in there. If you wanted to argue that, you got the points there to talk about and bring up yours. Next quick thing we're going to deal with is the entertainment industry reform and reparations. It's small. It's only 3 points. He's saying that now remember, Cube in the game. Remember Cube, man, he the one who's been speaking for a long time about policing. So again, now he's talking about entertainment stuff he been in, and he been doing his thing. Nobody can take that from him. So I think we should hear what he got to say. He say mandatory funding of black studios by the largest Hollywood studios, record companies, and the television studios and networks to compensate us for years of the lack of support, stereotyping, and the damage it has done to the black culture. Each of these organizations will be required to fund an amount yearly. Black studios will own and produce their content by the black creators and will be run primarily by black leadership. The content can be licensed to the major studios, but they don't run our stuff now. There was a point made by Chappelle on the SNL the other night. HBO and somebody else running his show, and he ain't getting a quota. And his folks still getting paid for every song Sam Cooke wrote, and it ain't none of his. Folks, this got to stop. He's saying the content can be licensed to the major studios. For a race to thrive, it must be able to create art that reflects its own views of the world. Y'all censor us on TV. We don't get to express it the way we want to, because if he say the stuff that my man be saying, like what he say, everybody can't do that. They won't let you work. You saw what they did to Cannon when he expressed his view of how he see it from his cultural standpoint. They put him off and made him make an apology for how he feel about himself. Man, come on. All right. He said racism still runs rampant through our society, and Hollywood is providing the instruction manual to it. That's what Q's saying as a person who dealing in it every day. His next point is that licensing of public airwaves to broadcast networks such as NBC, Fox, CBS, and ABC must require black produced content equal to 20% of the total content on the network as measured by time. Come on! The time slots must be of similar quality to other content. The same applies with radio stations and any other media given access to publicly licensed airwaves by the FCC. Y'all the monopoly. We can't even get on. This show here can't get. If they were doing that, this show could get picked up maybe, because we're talking about stuff that black people talking about. For example, listen what he's saying in his last point. A minimum of 13.4%. Why 13.4%? Because that's who we represent in the population. 13.4%. That's equal representation for us. a minimum of 13.4% of a black cast and crew on all major television and film productions. Ain't nothing y'all could produce in the United States that could be all white, because we was always around. Now, and then he's saying this: the crew requirements cannot be waived, but casts that are overwhelmingly white, black, Hispanic, Native American, Asian, and etc. can be waived as reasonable for TV shows and shows to be more reflective of their reality. He's saying if it's a show about black people, you can't have Harriet Tubman cannot be played by Sandra Bullock or any of them other actors. I don't think they said it was Sandra Bullock. They would name another name, but it can't be played by her. You have to be, come on now. Brad Pitt can't play Frederick Douglass. It's impossible. That's not right. That's all he's saying. He's saying if you're going to have a major show going on, have 13.4% representation of us in all aspects. But if you're doing an Indian show, then have the Indians be in it. Come on now. But see, this is not unfair. Now, who's arguing with that? I want to tell y'all, I get excited about it because y'all got to remember D.L. Hughley, who I really thought was a king of the comedy and a leader and a spokesman for us, because the brother Head is right. He went off about all this. I'm trying to find out what he finds so offensive. Thank y'all for tuning in with us today for this. It's been my pleasure getting down with you for this 5th and 6th reading. Remember now, we're going to be going with monuments and Black's responsibility. Monuments and Black responsibility will really be wrapping up this contract. And then he's got some other points we'll look at later. The neo-construction, economics, and education. And he's got an addendum, and then that's it. He's asking if you would mind getting in an open debate about this, and let's get this straight so that it can be ready for the first 100 days of the new 117th Congress in 2021 on these above proposals we talking about, y'all. See, when Biden get in there, we want to hear him saying some of this stuff, that it would be illegal for you to get beat up and it wasn't no fair, or ain't nothing going, you getting squared away, and that officer going to jail, period. Why not? Why we want him to come back and talk this same crap and then say he's a leader like Trump and said Trump don't want to move, man. They're going to have to move that boy. So we ought to get on this. Okay? So we'll come back to that again. Thank you for tuning in to the contract with Black America, parts 5 and 6. We'll see you later.